The 2026 Sepang MotoGP Shakedown Test wrapped up in dramatic style with a late rain shower on the third and final day, freezing the timesheets and confirming Honda test rider Aleix Espargaro as the man to beat at the very start of the new season. Across 3 days of running reserved for rookies and test riders, plus the full lineup of Yamaha's race squad, the tone was set early by Honda, and it never really faded. Aleix had already topped day one with a 1M58.091S, but he kept building, and on Saturday, he produced the lap that really made the paddock sit up, a 1M57.173s, the fastest of his 51 laps, and just 0.72s away from the 1M57.001s that put Pecco Bagnaia's Ducati on pole at last year's Malaysian Grand Prix. That is shakedown pace on a heavily revised RC2. 13V, and it underlines the feeling that Honda's late 2025 resurgence might not have been a fluke. While Aleix has been focused squarely on developing Honda's 2026 package, his fellow test rider Takaki Nakagami has already been off working on the 2027 project, testing a future spec machine at Sepang over Christmas, which explains why all eyes and all pressure were on Espargaro this week. He delivered and then some. Sharing the headlines with him was his brother Pol Espargaro, who led the way for KTM and completed an Espargaro 1-2 on the final classification. Pol opened the last day by lowering the best time of the week to a 1M57, 3 in the cooler morning conditions, slashing 0.6 off Jack Miller's Friday benchmark and briefly putting KTM in charge. As track temperature rose and then fell again through the day, Pol kept chipping away, eventually ending just 0.126s behind Aleix when the rain arrived to draw a line under any final time attacks. KTM's program at the shakedown was intense. Alongside Pol, veteran test ace Dani Pedrosa was once again in the thick of the work and made noticeable late progress to grab 7th overall, and Mika Kallio produced one of the most intriguing storylines of the week. For the first 2 days, Kallio was circulating in the 2M4S using a KTM prototype without a ride height device and widely believed to be close to a future regulation, 850cc style 2027 concept. Then, on Saturday, he suddenly hacked more than 4 seconds off his benchmark to record a 1M59.807s, strongly suggesting he had switched back to a full-fat 1000cc 2026 spec machine and giving KTM's engineers a direct reference between present and future. If Honda and KTM were the clearest signs of continuity and evolution, Yamaha represented revolution. The Japanese marque has walked away from its traditional inline-4 layout and arrived at Sepang with an all-new V4 engine, and the very first public laps of that concept were entrusted to Fabio Quartararo, Alex Rins, Jack Miller, and rookie Toprak Razgatlioglu. Quartararo, riding for Monster Yamaha, joined the test on day 2 and was immediately fast, topping the timesheets on Friday with a 1M57.908s. Not quite. That honor actually belonged to Jack Miller, riding the Pramac-branded Yamaha, whose 1M908 stood as the fastest V4 lap of the week until Aleix and Pol raised the bar on Saturday. But Fabio wasn't far away. He spent much of the shakedown relearning Sepang with a completely different engine character, trimming tenths here and there, and on the final afternoon he managed to take another 10th off his best, going deeper into the 1MAF77s to end the test 3rd overall behind the Espargaro brothers. The significance of those numbers becomes clearer when you compare them to his own history. Quartararo set the best lap at last year's Sepang Shakedown with a 1M57.794s, then found a full second during the official test that followed. This time around, he still hasn't beaten his qualifying lap from last October's Grand Prix weekend, and he needs to find almost 1 second next week to set a new personal best at Sepang, but with a completely new engine layout underneath him and the possibility of drier, cooler conditions, that target looks very realistic. Of course, all of this is unfolding under the shadow of those 22.7 Honda rumors. If reports about a future move prove to be true, the fact that Honda is already lapping within 0.2 of 22.5 pole on a test bike will be a reassuring sight for Fabio's camp. Behind Quartararo, the rest of the Yamaha Armada added depth to the V4's promising debut. Alex Rins, also on the factory monster Yamaha, saved his best for last. In the final hour before the rain, he broke into the 1M57s for the first time on the new bike, climbing to 4th overall and joining Miller in the select group of riders who have already beaten their qualifying laps from last year's Malaysian Grand Prix with the V4. Rins and Miller are now only about half a second away from their best ever inline 4 Sepang laps set at last year's official test, and this is still just a shakedown. The trend is clear. Yamaha's big gamble is already paying off in lap time, with 3 riders consistently hovering in the high 1 M57s to low 1 M58s bracket as they familiarize themselves with the engine's delivery, the different chassis balance, and the new aerodynamics package. Rookie Toprak Razgatlioglu, stepping up to MotoGP after Superbike glory, had a steeper learning curve but still improved each day. By Saturday afternoon, he had cut his best time again, ending the test just over half a second behind Miller, and locked in a close rookie battle with reigning Moto2 world champion Diogo Moreira. Moreira, riding for LCR Honda, produced one of the standout performances of the shakedown. On the final morning, he found a massive 1.6 seconds, dropping to a 1:58.3 and momentarily stunning the paddock with just how quickly he was adapting to the RC213V. That lap left him as the top rookie in the order, and by the end of the day, he was still fractionally ahead of Toprak once all improvements were accounted for, even after Pedrosa squeezed himself between the 2 newcomers on the final ranking. It's early days, but the message is that both rookies are already within touching distance of the leading group on unfamiliar machinery, and Moreira in particular is giving Honda another reason to be optimistic about its long-term future. The rhythm of the final day told its own story. In the cooler opening hour on Saturday, Pol Espargaro fired in that 1M57.3 to reset the reference by 0.6 over Miller's Friday lap, with Aleix just behind and Quartararo effectively matching Miller's old time for an early 3rd place. Rins, too, started strong by immediately eclipsing his Friday best, while Moreira's one-man 58.3 put him right in the midfield mix. By midday, Aleix struck back, taking over from his brother with a 1.577.2 and underlining Honda's consistency. At 1 p.m., it was still an Espargaro 1-2 on top, followed by the 3v4 Yamahas of Quartararo, Miller, and Rins. At 2 p.m., as most teams paused in the searing Malaysian heat, the paddock was already asking the question, would someone dip into the 1M56s once temperatures dropped? By 5 p.m., with 1 hour left, track conditions were close to ideal, and that final window was when Quartararo, Rins, and Toprak all found more time, reshuffling the order behind the 2 brothers and bumping Aleix Rins up to 4th overall. Then, with 10 minutes to go, just as riders were preparing all-out time attacks and end-of-test practice starts, the rain came, drizzling away any last hopes of a late-session surprise and locking in the times we'll be talking about all the way to the official test. For context, all of this shakedown speed is still a step away from the absolute Sepang benchmarks, but not a large one. Pecco Bagnaia's official all-time lap record stands at 1M5 6.337s, set in 22.4 on the Ducati Lenovo bike, and Alex Marquez holds the fastest race lap with a 1M5 8.873s from 22.3 on a Gresini Ducati. Aleix Espargaro's 1M5 7.173s, achieved on a Honda still deep in development trim, sits tantalizingly between those figures, comfortably quicker than historical race pace and already pushing toward qualifying territory. And remember, last year Quartararo improved by a full second between the shakedown and the official test. If we see a similar step this year from the frontrunners, there's every chance the 1M56s will be shredded when all the factory riders roll out in anger. That moment is coming fast. The official Sepang MotoGP test begins on February 3rd, and will feature the full field of teams and riders with only 2 major absentees, Jorge Martin on the factory Aprilia and Fermin Aldeguer at Gresini Ducati, both sidelined through injury. Ducati, still holding the lap record and last year's pole, will finally show its hand against this resurgent Honda and Yamaha's new-look V4 Army, while KTM will bring its race riders to stack their data on top of the groundwork laid by Pol, Pedrosa, and Kallio. But if the 3-day shakedown has taught us anything, it's that the balance of power in MotoGP might be shifting. Honda appears to have carried its late 2025 form straight into 2026, backing it up with hard numbers. Yamaha has reinvented itself technically and is already matching, and in some cases beating, last year's inline 4 times with a brand new engine concept. And KTM continues to be the relentless experimenter, fast in the present while quietly probing the future with its 2027 test bike. Add in a pair of hungry rookies already lapping in the 1M58s, and a transfer market shaped by whispers of Fabio Quartararo in Honda colors from 22.7, and the picture that emerges from Sepang is clear. This was more than just a systems check. The 22.6 MotoGP season has effectively begun, and if these shakedown laps are any indication, the fight to the front is going to be closer, more technical, and more unpredictable than ever.